All right, so I'm the guy that you guys come to when you have questions, you don't understand how something works, you need to know how a plugin is set up, all of that stuff. Everything Rust related, you know that you can come to me and ask me questions, and if I don't have the answer, I will get you the answer. But even sometimes I get it wrong. So in a previous video, somebody asked me, how do we make it so that we can have different permissions granted based on the different time of day in the server, not necessarily in the real world? And in my head, I immediately thought what this person was talking about was timed permissions. And while timed permissions will do what this person was asking to do, I think there's a better way to do it. Hey everybody, welcome back to Rust Admin Academy, where I'm teaching you everything that you need to know about owning and operating a successful Rust server. On this channel, I do plugin reviews and tutorials, plus I want to give you all of those little tips and tricks that are going to help you be more successful. So if you're brand new to the channel, consider subscribing so that you stay up to date on everything that we're working on, and of course you'll get notified as soon as I upload a new video. If you want to help what I'm doing at Rust Admin Academy, you can go to SRTBULL.com, click on the join button in the top right hand corner and become a member today. You get direct access to me, as well as the other premium members that are already in there, as well as a select few developers and some other important names in the game. So to answer this person's question, I thought using timed permissions was probably going to be the best way to go. And while it will work, it will sort of do what he's asking to do, but not exactly. So what timed permissions does is it allows you to select a permission and grant it to a player or a group of players. So if you wanted to grant a permission for 3 days or like 18 hours or whatever, you could do that using timed permissions. But what I believe this person was asking for was being able to grant permissions or any other various commands that you can execute from console based on what time it was in the server. So like in-game time. So time does run faster inside of a Rust server, even if you haven't adjusted for any of the other time elements. Your Rust day still has, X amount of daylight and X amount of nighttime, but that whole system still runs on a 24-hour clock. It's just sometimes that clock is either sped up or slowed down depending on what kind of changes you've made to your server. But even by default, a 24-hour Rust day is not a regular 24-hour day for us in the real world. So in order to do what this person was asking me to do, I would much rather use a plugin like TimedExecute as opposed to timed permissions. TimedExecute works on several different clocks, depending on what you want to do with the plugin. So it can be running on the in-game Rust time. It can also be running or monitoring real world time as well. And another reason why I think we should take a closer look at TimedExecute is because you probably already have this running on your server, at very least just to be running that restart command every day. So TimedExecute is obviously a free plugin. It's available from umod.org. I will put a link to it in the video description down below if you aren't currently using this. But like I said, I imagine most of you already are. Let's just have a really quick look at a basic generic default configuration file for TimedExecute. As you can see at the very top here, we've got the 4 different timers that we can utilize within this plugin. And then we've got the parameters for each one of those timers down here. So we need to decide which type of timer we want to use. Yes, you can use them all, but let's say you have all of these set to true and you have some goofy commands down below. You're going to see errors in your console. Not a big deal. It is just something to be aware of, that if you don't have a legitimate command down here and you have this timer turned on, it can throw errors in your console. No big deal. So what I want to direct your attention to today is the in-game timer section of the configuration file for TimedExecute, because this is exactly where we can do whatever we want. But in this particular case, we're going to be granting permissions based on what time it is in the game server, not in the real world. So let's go in and have a look at a configuration file that I've created specifically for this video. So it's not going to make a whole lot of sense, but you're going to see the power of TimedExecute within that configuration file. So as you can see, I've got my in-game timer set to true. I've got my real-time timer also set to true. I've got enable timer once set to false and enable timer repeat set to true. Now in this particular case, we don't have to have the timer repeat, so I'm going to turn that one off. Fine, let's deal with that later. So while I was figuring out what we can do with TimedExecute, which by the way is an unlimited list of things we can do, I just thought I would grab a whatever plugin. It didn't matter which one. In this particular case, I used my gather manager to see what changes that I could make automatically based on what time it was in my Rust server. So as you can see here at 1300 hours or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my gather rate changes from whatever it was prior to 10x. And it does that for the dispenser, the pickup, and the quarry. Plus I also said, let's do something in chat, letting our players know that we've actually changed the gather rate of the entire server to 10x. And then at 1400, which is 2 o'clock in Rust time, I changed the gather rate to 1x. Again, on the dispenser, pickup, and query. Plus, I also wanted to have a notification in chat letting our players know that the gather rate has now changed from 10x to 1x. Okay, great. So those are just commands that we can run. But the question was, can we grant permissions based on what time it is in the server? And the answer is, of course we can. So what I did here is at 1600 or 4 o'clock, I granted the default group the ability to use the vanish command that is normally only reserved for admins or moderators. So from 1600 till when it ends at 1615, where those permissions are then revoked, the player is able to use the /vanish command. Hugely dangerous. You don't want to use this on your particular server. I just wanted to give you an example of a plugin that has permissions that can be granted and revoked at a specified time in the Rust game time, not real world time. So at 1600 hours, the permissions are all granted, and then at 1615, all of those permissions are then revoked. So I'm going to show you what these things look like as they're happening in my console as well as in game. It's also important to note that I put a say command in there saying you can now use the vanish command for 15 minutes. It's not actually 15 minutes, by the way. So let me get into that for just 1 second. So the clock is actually based on a 24-hour clock. That's still true. But if you go into the decimal section, that doesn't work on the 60-minute clock that you're used to using. So it's not like you would do 1615 and that's 15 minutes after 1600 hours. It's actually more like, I'm having a really hard time describing this. It's more like a percentage. So the 15 after the decimal point is actually, we'll say 15%. So it would be like 15% of the next Rust hour, which isn't necessarily a real hour. I hope that's coming across. I had this all planned out in my head and I was like, how am I going to explain how this actually works? But think of it like a percentage. But because you can change how quickly time passes in your Rust server, it's just easier to think of it as more of a percentage. Oh man, I really hope that's coming across the way that I need to. You really need to understand that, like, if you put in 1615, that's not going to be 415. It's going to be 4 plus 15%. Oh my goodness, I'm totally botching this. All right, so let's go back to our configuration file. Let's save this. Let's do an o.reload time to execute in console so we can implement any of the changes that we've now made to our time to execute configuration file. Now, I need to change the time in game in order to trigger some of these events, which I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to do env.time and I'm going to change it to 12.99. And as you remember from looking at the configuration file, the first change that's going to happen starts at 1300 hours. So we're going to change the time to 1200 hours plus 99% of the next hour. So it's going to be just seconds away from 1300 hours. You can see why this is getting confusing. Anyways, let's go ahead. So we've set our time to 12.99. And within a couple of seconds here, you're going to see these changes happening to the gather manager right there. It just happened. So time to execute ran the command gather rate for dispensers times 10. It's going to do another one for pickup. There it is. And it should do another one for query. There it is right there. Plus we're going to do a say command right there. So it did the say command. And if we go in game, you can actually see that that say command looks like it came from the console because it essentially did. So the next event that's going to happen is at 1400 hours, which is 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Rust time. So let's change our time using the env.time command to 13.99. And then within a couple of seconds, you're going to see that it's automatically going to change our gather rates to 1x as opposed to the 10x that we just did. There we go. It's already starting. And then we should also get another say command letting everybody know in chat that the gather rate has been changed back to 1x. Okay, great. So all we're doing there is messing with the different commands that are available from a different plugin. And of course, we can do this with anything that has a server side command. We can put any commands in there that we want. But the question was, what about permissions? Well, as you know, granting and revoking permissions is just a simple console command, so there's nothing that says that we can't do the exact same thing. So at 1600 hours, we're going to start messing with the permissions that are granted to, in this case, the default group. If you wanted to have this set up for individual players, you could do that too. Or if you wanted to grant different permissions for your VIP group or your Discord group, whatever it is that you want to do, you can do in this command right here. So before I show you actually take place in game, let me show you what the permissions looks like in my server currently right now. So if we slide on over to the vanish section, which is right here, you guys can see that. So we've got all of these permissions right here. None of them are granted to the group default identified right here. So let's change our time. Let's go env.time. We're going to go to 15.99, which is right before the 1600 hour. That's going to trigger those changes to permissions. So within just a couple of seconds, we should see time to execute start executing those commands There we go. And because I did do a say command in there, it's going to tell us in chat that we actually have that permission granted to the default group. I'm going to go in game and show you. There it is right there. And if we go in game, as you can see, it says you have been granted the ability to use the vanish command for 15 minutes. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. Let's also have a look at the permissions for the group default. Let's scroll over to the vanish section right here. And you should see all of those permissions have now been automatically granted using the TimedExecute plugin. So now we also have it set up so that at 16:15, it's automatically going to revoke those permissions as well. And because it's not 15 minutes, it's actually 15% of the next in-game hour. This won't take very long. I don't have to wait for very long in order for this to happen. All right, so perfect. It's already started revoking those permissions, which is fantastic. That's exactly what we wanted. And if we go in game, have a look at our default group again. Let's just filter this by letter. And as you can see, all of those permissions have now been revoked and everything goes back to normal. Your default group no longer has access to the vanish permission. So is this a more complicated way of doing it? Will timed permissions actually do this better? I'm not sure. But like I said at the beginning of the video, I know that many of you already have TimedExecute on your servers, hopefully doing the restart command, if you don't have an automated restart system built in, of course. So why not just utilize a plugin that's probably already there? Using a plugin like TimedExecute is absolutely essential for servers that use plugins like Time of Day or Always Day, something that allows you to manipulate how Rust time works on your server. So both of those plugins that I just listed, Time of Day or Always Day, they allow the server owner to actually freeze time. So you would use one of those plugins if you wanted to keep things at 12 o'clock. Let's say if you wanted it always to look like this every day, all day long, you would use a plugin like that. However, what we're doing is we're actually freezing the Rust in-game time. Therefore, all of the automated events that would normally take place, cargo ship, patrol heli, Easter event, Christmas event, Halloween event, anything that is automatically scheduled is no longer going to take place, because we're holding that clock firm at 12 o'clock or whatever time it is that you decide on your server. So using a plugin like TimedExecute allows you to get around issues like that, but still be able to maintain your Rust time at whatever specific time you set it to. So as you can see in my case, this is where I've got the restart command built in for my server. So every day at 4 a.m. at the server location time. So in my particular case, I believe this one is in Chicago. So at 4 a.m. Chicago time, my server is automatically going to go through the restart process. Using the timer once or even the timer repeat commands, as you can see, I have this set up here to trigger the Easter event because I do or did have this server frozen at 12 o'clock every Rust day, no matter what was going on. So every 3,600 seconds, it would automatically trigger the egg hunt event. And you can do the same thing with the cargo ship, the patrol heli, anything you want. Any of the built-in server events that you've now frozen, you can now trigger automatically using a timer. Sometimes I get a little bit ahead of myself and I assume that everybody already knows these things. I'm thinking, okay, I did a video on TimedExecute like 6 years ago, so everybody today should know how TimedExecute works and how they can use it to their benefit in their server, which is just ridiculous of me to think that way, but that is what happens in my brain. Other things that happen in my brain is I come up with one solution when there's already a better solution available. So as soon as that comment came in, I was immediately thinking timed permissions, when especially now that I've set it up, I know that TimedExecute would actually be a better solution. Timed permissions definitely does have its use case. I just don't think that this is it. Anyways, I hope that helps you understand a little bit more about how you can make TimedExecute work for your server. And hopefully I'm getting the gears working in your head so that you can figure out the different things that you might want to do and couldn't think of how to do it on your server for your players and for your community. If you have any questions whatsoever about this plugin or any other plugin that I've ever covered in the past or haven't yet covered and probably should, make sure you leave me a comment in the comment section down below. As many of you already know, I spend a lot of time showing off the plugins at gameforfreak.io. However, I'm never going to ditch and not talk about what's going on over at Umod. Those plugins are essential to our success. So if you guys have any questions ever about any of the plugins that are on umod.org as well, don't even hesitate to ask me, because I'll do a deep dive into just about any plugin out there. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up for me. If you want to get into a little bit of the politics of YouTube, if you don't leave a like and you don't leave a comment on this video, then nobody else is going to see it. All you got to do is leave a comment, leave a like, and YouTube will automatically push this video out to more and more people. That's all I'm trying to do here, is help as many people as possible. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again next week. Wow, that got really messy when I was talking about the different times and like the after the decimal point and stuff like that. I'm sorry, but I tried to explain it. It's complicated, I guess.